Thank you for joining us here at the Pentecostals for this week's message. Our desire is to make a difference by loving God, creating community, growing in truth, and serving our world. If God has blessed you through this ministry, we want to encourage you to share it with someone and even consider partnering with us to help POR continue delivering God's Word all around the world. Check out our website, porva.org, to discover more about us and our ministries. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's message.
This morning, we're going to take a look at one of the most famous figures in the Old Testament. He was a poet, he was a warrior, he was a worshiper and a king, and his name was David. One of the reasons David's life was so compelling, and it was featured in so many different sermons, and we might get to see so many different books about him, and we hear about him all the time. It's because we get to see so much of David's life. See, in many cases, all we get for people in the Bible is we get to kind of see just a small piece of a person's life, and we only get to look in a window of time into a certain season of their story, and we don't get a whole picture of the people that we're looking at in the Bible. But when it comes to David, we get to see more than just a few pieces. We can see where David came from. We can see what he was called to and how God brought him from where he was and to where he was destined to go. And because his story is so complete, it can serve as a model for us in many ways. So let's go to Psalms 57 and 2. Psalms 57 and 2. And we're going to look at a declaration that David made. And we're going to spend the rest of the time here this morning. We're going to talk about what was going on in David's life when he wrote this declaration. Let's read that. You can follow along with me here. I cry out to God Most High, to God who will fulfill his purpose for me. If you can really understand what's happening here, it'll help you with your anxiety big time. Anybody, don't raise your hand, but somebody's dealing with some anxiety here today. If you're dealing with a little bit of stress, this is going to help you on a tremendous level. He called God the Most High. He is recognizing that God is over everything, and no matter what happens, what people do to me, no matter what happens around me, life is not going to be able to hurt me because I serve a God that is above all. He's going to work through it, and he's going to fulfill his purpose for me. David constantly shows us the importance of serving God's purposes. See, he shows us how to find God's purpose and how to fulfill it. So now, what's going on in David's life when he wrote about crying out to God Most High? He didn't write these words while swinging on a hammock on the beach, sipping some sweet tea, which sounds amazing. It's got to be easy talking about God's purpose and finding God's purpose when everything's going right. When you're moving towards that purpose and it's right there in front of you and it's starting to materialize. And it's easy to believe it when your purpose is right there in sight. And when it's almost there and you can see exactly what's going to happen, and it's just a matter of time before that purpose falls into place. It's easy to talk about it then, but it's another thing to talk about fulfilling God's purpose when everything is headed in the wrong direction. Somebody know what I'm talking about here today. When David was writing this verse about fulfilling God's purpose for his life, everything was moving away from what he thought was going to happen. Instead of getting closer to what God had told him was going to happen, things were getting farther away. Verse number 1, and we're looking at 1 Samuel 24, 1 through 2. Let's look at that together. After Saul returned from fighting the Philistines, he was told that David had gone into the wilderness of En-Gedi. So Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. He chose elite troops to go after David. Let me tell you something. When the purpose of God for your life is so significant, you need to expect the enemy to send out the special forces. Come on. We sometimes misread things. We say, God, have you forgotten me? Where in the world are you? I don't know what's going on in my life. God, where are all these situations are going against me? God, you must hate me. I don't know what's going on with my life. And instead he says, no. My call for your life, my will for your life, my purpose for your life is so significant that the enemy cannot ignore it any longer. And he sends out his special forces to stop it. Some of you are in that struggle right now. You say, man, I'm dealing with some stuff. I'm dealing with some situations. I can't deal with it. I don't know what it is. I think it's just God maybe has abandoned me in this situation. He said, absolutely not. It's just that I've got such a powerful hand of God on your life that the enemy says I can't ignore it. David is on the road to royalty, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be an easy road to travel. He's on the path that leads towards influence and purpose, but that path isn't pain-free and it isn't effort-free. Significance always comes at a cost. And at this point in his life, he's been anointed, but he's running like a common criminal. I mean, he's anointed. I mean, he already knows he's going to be king. I want us to get this picture before we go any further. This is David that knows he's going to be king. He's already been anointed by God, and he knows this, but instead of being king, he's running for his life. Now, hey, just think about it for a second. How would you handle that? You know what I'm saying? Oh, I'm king. Well, I ain't going to run from nobody. You know? Well, all right. So this is what David is dealing with here. And the circumstances he finds himself in completely contradict the calling in his life. The circumstances he's in right now seem to completely contradict what he can see going on around him. And he says, I don't know, I'm not too sure. I know I've been called, I know I've been anointed, but the circumstances don't seem to reflect that. Somebody's been there. Now let's look at this. We're going to look at Samuel 24:3. Here we go, verse 3. At the place where the road passes some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. You got to do what you got to do, okay? But as it happened, David and his men were hiding further back in that very cave. I guess they were hiding in a restroom is what it seems like they're doing there. I don't know. Seems an interesting place to hide. David had been good to Saul. He'd fought Saul's battles. He'd been loyal. He'd been faithful. But Saul, he was envious and insecure. And let me tell you something, that's a dangerous combination. And instead of rewarding David, Saul hated him. Instead of a promotion, David was given a death sentence. Now, hold on. I want us to stop for a second and think. You're really excited you're going into work. You've been working there for a while. You know you're up for a promotion. Everything is good. You got your nice clothes on. You're driving up. You're eyeballing that parking space that's reserved for that spot that you're supposed to be getting. Man, you're walking in. You're passing some cubicles. You're looking at people like peasants. You know what I'm saying? And you're moving by. You're like, listen, see ya. It's about to get good. And you walk up in that office and you're ready. And they're like, as you know, you're up for a promotion. We wanted to bring you in and talk to you about that today. You're like, yeah, I'm ready. And they're like, but instead of the promotion, we hereby sentence you to death. What? You know, come back on that one more time. I didn't think I heard that. Death. You know, at that point, that's when you spin around in circles a few times, you pull the fire alarm, and you dive out the window. Seriously, you're supposed to get a promotion. That's what David's thinking here. David's supposed to become king, and instead of walking in there being like, I'm finally going to be king. I'm going to get me a crown. No, he's been sentenced to death. And after months of running and hiding, Saul, his enemy, is alone and in a compromised position. That's all I'm going to say about that. And David could end all the injustice right there. It could all be over. The hiding, the running, the shame, the waiting. And David's men that were with him, They knew it. Let's look at verse 4. Now's your opportunity. David's men whispered to him, today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish. So David crept forward and cut off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. So David, he saw a shortcut. Sure. God had promised to fulfill David's potential someday. God had promised to carry him to his destiny someday. But David could make it happen today. See, if David was willing to do some things his way, he wouldn't have to wait for God to do it his way. So there's some interesting things that happen here, okay? That they take place, and when we start feeling the pressure to make the promise from God come to pass in our lives, if you're looking for a quick way to get really, really frustrated with your life, start trying to do what God has called you to do all by yourself. We know we shouldn't get ahead of God, but we get impatient. God, I know you called me to do this. I know I should be waiting, but I'm ready to take care of my business right now. God, why would I want to wait? I want it today. I want it now. I want my money and I want it now. J.G. Wentworth. Sorry. If you don't know what I was talking about there, you're really confused right now, aren't you? Yeah, there we go. And if we want to wait, if we have to wait for too long, we start looking around at other people. And we start wondering why we're not doing what they're doing, and why we're not living like they're doing, they're living, and how they're fulfilling their purpose and we're maybe not. And we live in a day and a time where we're just one click away from seeing other people living out their purpose. But I want to remind you this today, that God didn't call us to fulfill someone else's purpose. He called you to fulfill yours, not theirs. See, we can get so focused on the way that someone else is pursuing their calling that you abandon your own. You can get so focused on the direction that someone else is taking that you abandon your own direction that God has called you in. I want you to tell somebody, look at somebody beside you and say, God didn't call me to fulfill your purpose. You need to look at them again and say, thank God they didn't call me to wear that outfit either. No, I'm just kidding. Don't you say that. We don't have fist fights in here. This will set somebody free today. I want you to hear it. All you have to do is completely commit yourself to God's purpose for you. Now, somebody said, man, I need something profound. I need it to sound really profound. I need something to change my life. No. That'll change your life right there. If I would completely commit myself to God's purpose for me, if I commit myself, you know what? God, whatever that is, my entire life is focused on that at this point. The purpose of, listen, I got these shoes here. The purpose of these shoes, let me here. This purpose of this shoe, this feels weird. The purpose of this shoe is, to protect my foot. If I'm out there, I'm walking on gravel, I'm walking on hot pavement, if the ground's wet, what's it going to do? It's going to protect my foot, right? I got this glove up here, and the purpose of this glove is if I'm working, I don't get splinters, they don't get too dirty, I guess, I don't know, and maybe if it's in the wintertime, I don't get frostbite, who knows? And I've got this glove here, but what if at some point, these two, they just got tired of their own purpose and they wanted to pursue each other's purpose. You know what I'm saying? At some point, this shoe says, I'm getting tired of getting stepped on. I'm getting tired of doing what I want to do. The hand, it just has a more glorious job than the foot does. The hands get to do greater things. I'm just tired of doing that. So it wants to fulfill that purpose. And then here it is, and it's trying to fulfill this purpose. And I'm trying to read the Bible, and I can't. Things are just difficult, and I'm trying to look at my phone. Everything is more complicated. It is just silly. And I'm not going to try to do it, but if you put the glove on your foot, no, it doesn't work. And everybody sees how it doesn't work. The reality is this: we do it all the time with our lives. We try our best to see someone else's purpose and we say, I like that purpose more. I don't really know about mine. I'm tired of my life. My life seems like I'm getting stepped on, so I want to do what they're doing. We don't really know what they're doing, but we see it through the internet, or we see it through the highlights of their life, and we're tired of our purpose, so we start to pursue someone else's. And the problem is it doesn't work. It never fits. It never will. When you put yourself under the pressure of a purpose that God didn't intend for your life, you will get stressed out, you will get burnt out, you will be worn out. Of course you can't sleep. Of course you feel like a failure. But God says, what I put in you is for you, and you're not responsible for someone else's results. And we get so stressed out, and we get so worried, and we get so, I feel inadequate. I feel like I'm this. I feel like I'm less than, and everything else is just, they're really doing better than me. What's the problem with my life? And the problem is we have what God has given us. Let's use that and not focus on what we don't have. Turn to somebody and say, serve the purpose that God has given you. That's what David did. If you know very much about his life, you know that he never once sought the position of king. We live in a world that talks a lot about finding a purpose, but I wonder if what we're really doing is seeking a position. And we're confusing position with purpose. See, David figured out the way to discover his purpose. Rather than pursuing a position, he sought out ways to serve. Man, this hit me like a ton of bricks when I was studying it, and I'm hoping it does to you today too. We confuse this purpose, and we're saying, man, God, I need a purpose for my life. But instead, we see something up on a pedestal that looks like a position. And instead of trying to just seek out purpose, we see it as some sort of position that I could end up in, some sort of role, some sort of responsibility, something in a place that people can look at and say, this person has arrived. And we see it as a position rather than a purpose. And David said, I'm not seeking a position, I'm looking for ways to serve. So there's a lot of people that are really interested in the answer to the question, what is my purpose in life? They ask the question to a lot of people, and they're hoping that a conversation will answer that question. David did not talk his way into his purpose. He served his way into his purpose. The way to find out what you're called to do, oh, come on, I'm going to give the answer. You ready? Serve. That's the way you find out. All he ever did was just serve out the purpose of his current assignment. Not his future assignment, not what he knew he was going to be at whatever time it was. Whatever he was called to do, whatever responsibility he had at that moment, whatever options he had at that moment, he says, I'm going to serve to the best of my ability. So when you serve the purpose, God will give the promotion. When you serve the purpose, God will give the promotion. Let me tell you about something that you don't want a promotion that God doesn't give you. You don't want a job that God doesn't give you. You don't want a ministry that God doesn't give you. You don't want a spouse that God doesn't give you. It never ends well. All we need to do is serve the purpose that God has set in front of us. That's exactly what David did. Let's look at Psalms 78 and 70. It says, God chose his servant David, calling him from the sheep pens. He was serving where? In the sheep pens. That's how David became king. He didn't come into his calling by waiting in line for an opportunity. By waiting in line is saying, here, I see an opportunity, I see something flashy, I'm going to wait in that line, I'm going to pursue that. No, he says, I'm going to serve where I am at. David started serving in the sheep pens. He was doing what he knew to do and doing it as well as he could. It wasn't financially rewarding. It wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't flattering. See, when you're serving your purpose, you don't have to search for promotion. Promotion will find you. God made David a king, not because he sought the position, but because he served the purpose. Now remember this, Saul is currently in a place of royalty that he had promised to David. Saul had forced David to live on the fringes of society, and Saul repaid kindness with cruelty. David lived to serve Saul, and he got spears thrown at him for no other reason but for jealousy and insecurity and a good dose of crazy. And at this point in his story, David has found his enemy alone, vulnerable, and unaware. If he decides to kill Saul, it's a done deal. Come on, get in this picture with me right now. Get into the story. If he decides to kill Saul, it's over. There's no guards. Saul's outnumbered. There's nowhere to run. So David is already battling this personal desire for revenge. And then his guys pipe up. His boys are like, they're whispering, because I'm wondering, it's like, is this cave loud? Because I don't know what's going on in this cave. How they got to be whispering, right? The Bible says they whisper. They're like, you got this. This is your chance. Come on, man. Do it. Carpe diem, go. and so that's where these guys are at. And they're saying, they even stop to spiritualize it a little bit. I always find this interesting. God has handed him to you on a silver platter. If you kill him now, hold on here, we can leave this cave and establish the kingdom. Let me stop for a second and say this. If you're getting words from your friends that even sound spiritual, be careful if it's got the word we in there somewhere. If it benefits you, if it benefits them a whole lot and they're giving you advice about how bad you need to do something in your life, and if it's somehow it's time for you to move out so we can move in together. You know what I'm saying? Like you singles that are trying to look for roommates, I'm telling you, God's saying it's time so we can move in. Like, wait a second, there seems like there's something in it for you. That's what's happening here. They're like, we can leave this cave if you go do this. So they said, isn't that what God called you to do anyways, basically? And what they're saying is partially true, okay? A lot like the news we read or see, It's partially true. It's kind of there, but not really. All right, so we got this partial truth there. And they've got a couple of facts, but there's a little bit of a spin on it. And let's go back and read it again, verse number 4. Today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power. Okay, go. Good, that's good. So far, so good. God did tell David that he would deliver his enemy into his hands. And he did tell David that he would be king. Okay, so we got that. All right. But they got a little creative at the end there. And it says, to do with as you wish. You won't find that anywhere in the Bible that God tells David, you just do with as you wish. He never gets a free pass to whatever he wanted to do. He never got told that, you just do what you feel like doing. You go with your own plan, and I'll just make my plans according to your plans, David. No, absolutely not. Here's what it said. Well, here's the next point. When he finds Saul all alone, David has an opportunity to get what God has promised him in a way that wasn't like God at all. See, Saul is literally a sitting duck here. He's helpless. And David he has a chance to do whatever he wants to do, and not all those choices lead to the same outcome, and a lot of riding on his decision here. So at this point in time, David does something strange. He does something really strange. It's strange for two reasons here. First, he doesn't kill his enemy. Now listen, this is your chance, man. I mean, especially the Old Testament. Why are you not just going over and saying, you know what I'm saying? He's done. I don't know what that was, but it sounded cool. He's done. He's finished. It doesn't make sense to his guys. His guys don't get it. why don't you just go ahead and finish this thing? Here we go. Second, he does something he's never done before. We've never seen David act like this anywhere else in the recorded history of his life. Here we are, verse 4. So David crept forward and cut off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. He cut a corner. He took a shortcut. He didn't actually kill David, but he came close enough to do it. He wanted to show his enemy, I could have ended you right here, right now. But what I did to your robe, listen, Saul, I could have done to you. But in his heart, he knew that he'd gotten very close to doing something that was very wrong. I wonder if you've ever caught yourself before you did something you knew you would regret. You didn't take action, but you were so close that it scared you, and you said, wow, I almost did that. How did that happen? And it makes you wonder in yourself, how did I ever get that close? How did I ever let myself get to that point? I didn't actually do it, but I'm scared of the fact that I was that close to doing it. And up to this point in his conflict with Saul, David has always taken the high road, and he refused to fight fire with fire, and he refused to fight hate with hate. But in this cave, he begins to sink to Saul's level, and it scares him. In the cave, he found an unexpected opportunity to take out his enemy. You do not know what's in your heart until you have an opportunity. You can theorize all you want, but it's not until that situation actually materializes right in front of you that you know how you're actually going to respond. And it's at this point in his life that David has to prove whether he really believes the promise of God or whether he believes they will only happen if he helps it out a little bit. I believe your promise, God, but I'm going to need to get myself. God, you probably need a little bit of help. I trust you, God, but I also know that I probably need to step in and help you out. So he sneaks up on Saul with what is most likely the same sword that is used to kill the giant named Goliath. The same sword that possibly cut off that giant's head is used to cut off a piece of Saul's robe. He doesn't kill him, but he just cuts a small piece. And the Bible says that when he took matters into his own hands, when he started helping God out, verse 5, David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. Why would David feel bad about taking a piece of Saul's robe when Saul was trying to kill him? It's just a piece of his robe. Why would he feel bad about taking vengeance on a man, a king that was bad for the whole kingdom, for the entire nation? You can only understand what was happening inside of that cave that day by understanding what was happening outside of the cave. In verse 3, we read that the cave was located at the place where the road passes some sheepfolds. The cave was by the sheep pens. That's where David started his journey. That's where he came from. Inside the cave, we have Saul with a robe that represents what David is called to. But David is in between where he came from and where he's called to. The sheep pen is where he was, and the throne room is where he's going to be. And it's at this point where David cuts a corner, and he takes a shortcut, and his conscience begins to bother him, and he says, I don't want to be a king, that kind of king. I want what God has for me, but not like this. David momentarily compromised his character, and his conscience sounded off because of it. He suddenly felt the disconnect between who he was and who he should be. David was aware enough to catch the compromise the moment it started. But for many people, the death of our character is the slow and subtle process. And David said, I'm going to try to catch it before it happens. Some of you will have the opportunity to advance your career if you just make a small compromise here and there. Tweak the numbers just a tad. There's somebody else that's open for that promotion, and you talk bad about them just a little bit behind their back. You do what you can to make tweaks just here and there, and you say, I can advance my career if I do that, and somebody has to stop and say, I want to advance my career, but not like that. Some of you today, you're dating, and you're getting all googly-eyed and to the point where you can only see them, and you're starting to finish each other's sentences, and it's so romantic and amazing. And you start picking out future baby names, but maybe it's starting to go a little bit too far, and it's right there on that edge. You're not married, but you start acting like it, or you start tempted to be acting like you're married, and you have to stop and say, I want a relationship, and I want to love them. I want to love and be loved, but not like this. Not like this. Some of you, you're starting to turn to a habit or a substance that helps you fight off anxiety or stress that you're dealing with, but it's just a little thing. I can stop anytime I want. I'm just doing this, doing that, and I find myself going to that instead of prayer sometimes, and I feel like I'm kind of moving in that direction towards this substance more than I should, and somebody needs to stop and say, I want to fight off anxiety, I want to fight off stress, but not like this. Not like this. The truth is, the subtle corners we cut day in and day out, the half-truths, the rationalization, the excuses, the lies, they create an ever-growing gap between who we are and who we hope to be. We justify it by saying, I'm not a terrible person. It's just a little piece. It's just a small part. And if I cut this small part, it's not a big deal. There's something more important than where you started and more important than where you're going. It's how you get there. How you make money means more than what you have. What corners we cut to get there. If you miss watching your kids grow up to be successful, if you check out on your marriage to put all your focus on making money, if you check out on your church and give up on going to the house of God to have more time or to make more money, you will have the success that you sacrifice for. But what you sacrifice to get it is worth far too much. How you advance your career means more than where you end up. If you took shortcuts and you cut corners to get there, you will have lost the most important thing along the way. That's your integrity. David's conscience is bothering him because he's remembered, this is not the way I do things. This is not who I am. See, he turns to his men who are already ready to kill David or kill Saul, and they're ready at a second's notice. They're ready. And let's look at verse 6. The Lord forbid that I should do this to the Lord my King. I shouldn't attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him. He's saying, I'm not going to become something I'm not in pursuit of what I want. I'm not going to become something I'm not in the pursuit of what I want. Yes, I'm called to be king, but not like this. I didn't get here by taking shortcuts. I started in the valley, but I won't climb to the top by sacrificing my values. He realized that if he did this himself, he would be responsible for the outcome. I'm going to stop and tell somebody today. You can jump out there and you can do some things yourself. You can help things along. You can say, God, I don't know if this is your perfect will. I'm going to just hopefully assume this is your provisional will, and you will provide a way, and you'll just turn your head and bless me once I've made the mistake. I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and step out in faith and do this myself, even though I don't think this is you calling me, but I'm going to help you out. The reality is you are responsible for those actions. But when God does it, when God steps out in front of you and takes care of it for you, he is responsible. He will make a way. If there's something in the path, he gets rid of it. But if we make our own path, we are responsible majority of the time to handle what's in that path. So sometimes what we want isn't the problem. It's the way you're going about getting it. There's nothing wrong with David's desire to be king. God gave him that desire. There's nothing wrong with many of the desires that you have, but God gave you that. But he knew that God can't honor the promise if David didn't honor the process. So we have to get back and remember who called us to begin with. If he called you, come on. If he called you and he made the promise, it's going to be up to him to make it come to pass. It's going to be up to him as long as we are faithful to the process. If you give up your integrity to get what you want, when you finally have whatever it is, you won't be the same person you started out as. I'll say it again, how you get it is just as important as what you get. See, it's not your competency that determines your capacity. We all know that, we know a lot of stuff, and we know people that know a whole lot of stuff. Man, they know, we're like, wow, those are some competent people. And that's not a bad place to be in life, okay? But often, the people that know a ton, they just aren't, they're not any happier. They're not in the best place. They're struggling. They're struggling within themselves. They're struggling to who they are. And it's all the competency in the world can't make up for the lack of character. Ultimately, your character is your lid. Your character is the ceiling in your life. You will never raise above your character. And whatever issue that you've got and whatever situation you're dealing with, understand your character is that ceiling. A lack of character kills careers. It destroys families. It ruins friendships, and it destroys influence. And even if you never get found out, even if you cut corners so carefully that no one knows it, your lack of character will limit the joy and the depth that you experience in God and your relationship with other people. Your character is your lid. Your character not only dictates your capacity, your character will become your legacy. When your competency leaves the first impression, your character leaves the lasting one. When people, they forget a lot about the things about you, and they forget things that you might say over time and do over time, but one thing will always stay with them. They will never, ever forget your character or lack of it. That's why it's not good enough to just consider what you've accomplished. What you have to think about is how you accomplished it. You won. You won. That's great. But what did you have to give up to get there? You closed the deal. You got the raise. You got the promotion. You got the position. You made your point. You argued online because, boy, that sure made your point. But what did you have to give up to get there? How did you do it? How was your character in the process? Jesus' disciples, they had to learn the same lesson. Peter, I know you want the kingdom of God, and I know that you're so excited about what Jesus was preaching and how the kingdom of God was coming to earth and it was going to be great. But you can't cut off people's ears in the process. You had the right desire, but the wrong method. Not like this. James and John, I know that you didn't like the way the Samaritans treated you, but you don't answer an insult by trying to call fire down from heaven and burn them all up. Not like this. All of them wanted the Messiah to crush the Roman Empire, and they wanted an earthly kingdom, not a heavenly one. Jesus didn't come to rule. He came to rule, but not like this. There was going to be a cross before there was a crown. There was a process to go through before the promise came to pass. It's the same for me, and it's the same for you. I'd ask you to stand. Let me close today by saying there's maybe nothing wrong with your desire. But God wants you to take a look at how you're going about getting it. It's what you do to get it that will determine if you keep it and you walk in it. Let me say, I ask you to say this out loud with me. Please say it. My character is my legacy. I'd ask you to close your eyes. Some of you are here today and you're feeling a disconnect between who you are and who you know you should be. Some of you are in a situation right now where you're saying, I'm better than this. I want to get to where I want to go. I want to be with that person. I want to do this thing. I want to accomplish this and that, but not like this. I will not become something I'm not in pursuit of what I want.
On behalf of Pastor Joe Forbush and the Pentecostals of Richmond, thanks again for spending time with us today. God bless.